In January 1952, the sea was calm off the Skagerrak Strait. NATO's mini-submarine K-17 departed from Kiel under Lieutenant Anders Holm. With 4 men on board, its orders were routine coastal patrol, hydrophone sweeps, and silent return. At 3:45 a.m., transmissions ceased mid-sentence. No flares, no distress code, for weeks. British and Danish patrols combed the waterline. Nets dragged empty. Depth charges stirred nothing but silt by spring. The Navy wrote the file closed. Families buried empty coffins under stone markers that said, "Lost at sea." 70 years later, in Copenhagen's Old Town, a subway drill struck metal sealed beneath the street. Workers expected a forgotten cistern instead. Weld lines curved in naval steel, paint flaking to reveal NATO insignia. Inside lay 5 skeletons still strapped to their posts, and a half-burned logbook describing a meeting point on land. The file had never ended. It had only been buried. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The patrol was filed as routine. On the evening of January 12, 1952, the NATO mini-submarine K-17 eased away from the quay at Kiel under an overcast sky. It was a prototype, compact, meant for shallow approaches and silent reconnaissance. Its crew was 5 men, none over 35. Lieutenant Anders Holm carried command, a man whose log entries had always been precise and spare. Beside him, Ensign Michael Dreyer managed sonar, his notebooks crammed with hydrophone readings. Petty Officer Eric Vangsgaard tended machinery, the diesel units humming low before the final dive. 2 other sailors, recorded only by surnames in transit sheets, completed the roster. They descended beneath a black sea with no ceremony. Departure time was 11 p.m. Radio checks confirmed frequency integrity. A supply officer on shore noted the last clear words of Holm running silent. All instruments steady. From there, the channel closed. The submarine's plotted course was north, skirting the Skagerrak, where merchant shipping lanes thinned. The orders given to Holm, later released in fragments, described standard patrol with acoustic verification. Nothing unusual, nothing that would suggest disappearance. Weather logs confirmed calm waters and light winds. Barometric readings held steady. At 2:10 a.m., the hydrophone tapes captured merchant screws passing to the west. Dreyer's clipped handwriting marked the entry traffic heavy. No contact. At 3:17 a.m., another entry in his ledger described muffled interference, mechanical origin. At 3:45 a.m., the transmissions ceased. There was no SOS, no prearranged signal. A routine call was cut mid-sentence, a sentence that began with position and broke into static. When contact was not regained by dawn, watch officers escalated, naval control stations traced triangulated bearings, patrol vessels left Frederikshavn within hours. By midday, British destroyers joined from the east. For the next 10 days, the surface and seabed were searched. Minesweepers dragged cables. Fishing boats were diverted under naval order. All records showed calm water, minimal current. No debris surfaced, no oil slick spread. Nets found only mud. The absence was total, and, for the Navy, intolerable. The official telegrams sent to families bore the phrase "presumed lost." Empty coffins were filled with folded flags at Copenhagen's military cemetery. Lieutenant Holm's parents stood beside Dreyer's fiancée as chaplains spoke of sacrifice. The sea, it was said, had claimed the men whole, but there were discrepancies. A log officer later recalled that Holm's navigation chart was removed from archives. A sonar technician swore the final tape spool was still warm when taken into custody, then marked classified. What was left behind in the accessible file was only silence. Forensic review decades later would note a final artifact, the hydrophone tape. The spool had been cut off abruptly, as if the recording machine itself were powered down mid-operation. The last 3 seconds registered a sharp knock, metallic, reverberating through hull plates. Analysts compared it against dozens of recordings of collisions and groundings. It matched neither. It matched, instead, the sound of steel locking against stone. In 1952, no one was told this detail. The search reports ended with the phrase, "No wreckage recovered." Patrol concluded. By spring, the Navy closed the file. Families carried the absence into their homes. The submarine was not found in water, and so it was forgotten. The final sentence of Dreyer's notebook remained hydrophone distorted, bearing wrong, compass deviation evident. The compass needle had turned inland. Naval Command could not accept absence as an explanation within 24 hours of the loss. The Danish frigate Holger Danske was dispatched to sweep the Skagerrak. British destroyers joined, their sonar beating steady rhythms into the sea. Fishing vessels were conscripted to drag weighted nets. Each sweep came back clean. The weather, steady and clear, betrayed no hint of storms in official logs. The sea was described as flat, unbroken. The absence of wreckage began to feel deliberate. Families waited in apartments across Copenhagen. Telegrams arrived in blunt language. Lieutenant Anders Holm's parents were told their son had been lost in service. Ensign Michael Dreyer's fiancée, Karen, received a single line, vessel presumed lost, body unrecoverable. Petty Officer Vangsgaard's mother buried an empty coffin beneath the military cemetery's frost. Clergy spoke of sacrifice while relatives clutched folded flags heavy with absence. No bodies, no debris, only ceremonial stone to mark what had not been found. Inside Naval Archives, another process unfolded. Depth charts were drawn and redrawn, patrol logs stamped classified. One document, a bathymetric chart filed under routine fisheries, was altered. Later investigators noticed the overlay a penciled trench that did not exist, a suggested resting place for the K-17. The falsified feature steered searches away from coastal shallows toward deeper water where nothing would ever be recovered. The forgery passed unnoticed at the time. It sat in folders for 70 years. A quiet misdirection. Major Robert Alden, a British liaison stationed in Copenhagen, noted the inconsistencies. He observed how quickly the file was sealed, how abruptly search operations ended after 2 weeks, in a private memorandum. Later declassified. Alden wrote, "No oil trace, no flotsam. Closure premature, suggest hidden cause." His caution was not welcomed. Superiors filed his memo under speculative. Within months, he was reassigned to London. Whispers spread among enlisted men. Sailors spoke of hydrophone recordings confiscated by intelligence officers. Dock workers recalled crates marked restricted being hauled off under guard. The official communiques said the K-17 had gone down without a trace. Yet fragments of truth surfaced in corridors, half-sentences about a tape spool, a logbook, a compass that pointed wrong. None were spoken aloud at briefings. None were preserved in open files. Families attempted appeals. Holm's father wrote to the Danish Ministry of Defense demanding renewed searches. He was told the case was closed, the sea too vast. Dreyer's fiancée petitioned for access to radio transcripts. She received no reply. Within a year, the households returned to silence. Photographs of the missing hung in frames, medals placed on mantels. Official recognition stopped at ceremony. The search reports ended with a haunting uniformity: no wreckage, presumed lost. The phrasing was repeated across every dispatch. as if dictated from a template. Years later, analysts found marginalia on one surviving sheet, a faint annotation in another hand, docked. The word was circled twice, then crossed out. Its author never identified. For decades, the sea held its silence. Files were boxed, shelved, and eventually misplaced. By the 1970s, the submarine's name was spoken only at gravesides. To the public, it was another Cold War disappearance, folded into statistics. To the families, it was unfinished absence, and to the officers who once filed the reports, it was a chapter they were ordered not to reopen. The falsified depth chart remained the only visible clue of intervention. The penciled trench, neatly aligned, had redirected months of effort into empty water. It ensured nothing would be found where the submarine truly rested. The deception was quiet, but effective. Beneath the surface of official paper, the loss was shaped into silence. 70 years later, the ground beneath Copenhagen shifted. In March 2022, crews broke soil for the city's newest subway extension, Line 5 tunneling beneath the old quarter where cobblestone streets lay over centuries of foundations. Surveyors had mapped layers of clay, silt, and medieval brick. They expected minor resistance stone, water seepage, perhaps the remnants of old cellars. Nothing in their schematics suggested naval steel. At 10:03 a.m., a tunneling machine shuddered against an obstruction. Its drill head, built to chew through rock, screeched against something harder. Operators assumed a buried cistern, a forgotten conduit. Alarms cut the drive, and work lights flashed across a jagged breach. When workers descended, they saw flaking gray paint and riveted seams. The shape was curved, not angular, unmistakably marine in design, welded steel pressed up against soil as though it had been laid deliberately. Within minutes, engineers sealed the shaft, and city police marked the zone off limits. Anna Cruz, lead site engineer, signed the incident log. She noted fragments stripped from the drill-flaked paint, curled into thin sheets. Laboratory cleaning revealed layers of coating. Beneath the outer gray, used in civilian waterworks, lay another color, faded but distinct naval blue, stamped faintly with a 5-point star. NATO insignia, partially abraded, emerged through corrosion. The sample, small as a coin, became the first forensic marker of what the ground had hidden for 7 decades. Municipal authorities called in the Danish Emergency Management Agency, the agency, expecting an unexploded bomb, approached with remote sensors. Instead of munitions, they charted an enclosed hull, 12 meters long, oriented upright in the clay. Reports noted no sign of flooding, no collapse. The structure was whole. Its composition, steel plating 2 centimeters thick, matched mid-century submarine construction. When measured, the borehole diameter aligned almost perfectly with the vessel's width. The tunneling machine had drilled directly into its side. Police set perimeter tape across Nijhan's narrow streets. Residents watched from balconies as floodlights and cranes gathered. Rumors spread quickly: an unexploded U-boat, a Soviet spy device, a Nazi relic. Officials gave no statement. The object was listed only as obstruction, yet photographs taken by a subcontractor circulated through encrypted forums. One image showed weld seams scored by drill teeth, paint curling back to expose a stenciled code beginning with K. The letters blurred, but recognizable to anyone who knew naval designations. City archives revealed no record of decommissioned ships buried beneath Old Town. Archaeologists insisted no naval craft had ever been scuttled inland. The location was impossible kilometers from the sea, beneath centuries of urban growth. But the measurements held. A submarine sat locked in earth, its bow angled toward shore. Forensic teams scraped the drill head. Metallic residue carried traces of lead primer common to NATO hulls of the early 1950s. Microscopy revealed stress fractures consistent with long burial in compacted soil, not in water. Analysts concluded the vessel had been sealed dry. Its paint lacked salt corrosion, suggesting it had never flooded after emplacement. Whatever the circumstances, it had been intentionally positioned beneath the city. Anna Cruz wrote in her engineering log that evening, "Object is naval hull, welded closed, orientation inland, not waterborne." Her entry, later subpoenaed, was the first civilian acknowledgement of the impossible. The subway project halted. Construction crews stood down, machines idling in the dark shaft. Authorities widened cordons, citing safety, and beneath layers of clay, steel seams waited. The fragment of paint with NATO markings was logged, sealed, and transported to a defense archive. Its stenciled letter K remained faint but legible. The drill had bitten into a ghost. Excavation lights cut into the soil, turning the old town shaft into a stage, day after day. Cranes pulled away earth in measured lifts. The curved outline lengthened as more of the buried structure came into view. By the third week, there was no doubt it was a submarine, 12 meters long, wedged vertically in compacted clay, its bow angled upward, its stern sunk deep. The surface showed neither war damage nor rust pitting from seawater. The steel was dry, preserved, as though it had been entombed on purpose. Weld seams ringed the hatch. Forensic metallurgists concluded the closure had been done from the inside. Someone had sealed the crew in. The discovery was photographed from every angle, lenses recording stamped bolts, stress striations, flaking coats of naval primer. The vessel bore a faint marking near its bow, K-17, still discernible beneath grime. It was the same designation listed in a NATO loss report from January 1952. Police secured the cordon, but defense officials moved faster, by order of the Danish Defense Ministry. The shaft became classified ground. Anna Cruz, the engineer who had filed the initial obstruction report, was briefed in private. She was told the object was a relic, to be treated as sensitive material. Her logbook was sealed. She continued attending meetings, though her authority on site had ended from then on. Excavation was directed by men in unmarked coats who arrived in black vehicles without plates. The hatch was tested for pressure. It showed no yield. A plasma cutter was prepared, but the forensic team hesitated. If atmosphere remained sealed inside, sudden exposure could be hazardous. Instruments measured traces of nitrogen leaking through seams, evidence of an ancient compressed environment. They drilled a pinhole and vented. The air that escaped was stale, with a faint metallic tang, absent of salt or decay. It had been trapped since the 1950s. When the hatch finally opened, cameras recorded the interior. The control space was cramped, machinery bolted tight, dials frozen in mid-rotation, cloth straps still hung from crew stations, frayed but intact. Every surface was coated in fine silt, the product of decades of still air. Forensic officers entered slowly, stepping past corroded panels. The submarine had not collapsed. It had been deliberately prepared for burial. The compass drew the most attention. Its casing was bent, glass fractured. The needle pointed stubbornly toward shore, 30 degrees off magnetic north. Analysts documented marks around the housing scratches consistent with forced adjustment. Someone had physically altered the orientation. The logbook later recovered would confirm Dreyer's note about deviation. Even here, sealed in steel, the compass pointed wrong. Every inch was photographed, catalogued. Toolkits lay undisturbed, wrenches aligned. No evidence of struggle, no signs of sabotage from outside. The weld lines on the hatch confirmed a conscious act from within. Whoever last closed the submarine had chosen to stay inside. The forensic anchor logged for the file was the compass distorted, forced out of true, locked in an orientation that made no navigational sense. It became the central image of the chamber, a symbol of misdirection, of landfall where sea patrols had expected none. Outside, beneath winter skies, Copenhagen residents whispered about the machines parked across Nyhavn. Officials said little. Journalists were kept away. Only a handful of workers knew what had been uncovered. They carried photographs on their phones, images of a submarine set upright in the earth, its compass bent inland. Steel had been buried like a coffin, and now the coffin was open. The first entry into the crew compartment took place under floodlights lowered down the shaft. Protective suits shielded investigators from dust and possible toxins. Cameras filmed continuously, capturing every angle of the interior. The compartment was small, designed for endurance but not comfort. Pipes ran low along the ceiling, paint blistered but intact. Dials on the control panel were frozen mid-range, levers locked in neutral. 5 skeletal remains sat in place, slumped where the men had last worked. Lieutenant Anders Holm's bones were identified by insignia remnants still on his decayed uniform sleeve. Ensign Michael Dreyer's remains were at the sonar console, one hand stretched forward. Petty Officer Eric Vangsgaard's skeleton rested by the engine housing, tools scattered near his feet. The other 2 men, their names never fully recovered from Navy rosters, sat motionless at stations, straps holding them upright long after breath had gone. The condition of the remains suggested no violent trauma. Skulls were intact, bones unmarked. Uniform fabric bore no evidence of tearing or heat damage. Instead, posture indicated slow asphyxiation. The welded hatch had sealed the men into an oxygen-starved vault. The submarine had become their tomb. Forensic officers photographed each station. On Dreyer's lap lay a packet of oilskin, water-resistant, edges curled with age. His fingers had closed around it in death. When lifted, the packet cracked but held. Inside were mission log pages, written in fountain ink. Half of them scorched at the edges. Burn marks suggested a small flame had been used, perhaps an attempt to destroy contents before death. Some pages survived. They bore dates from early January 1952 and terse entries in Holmes' hand. The log confirmed departure from Kiel and routine patrol orders. Then entries shifted. Phrases like shore directive, contact expected, and rendezvous in Copenhagen appeared. One final notation, smudged by moisture. Red docking position inland, under cover. The phrase was underlined. Analysts logged the document as classified evidence. The packet was sealed in a sterile container and transferred into custody of Danish intelligence. Lars Enevoldsen, an investigator with the Danish Security and Intelligence Service, arrived to oversee, middle-aged, precise, known for his work on Cold War archives. He took personal possession of the packet. Witnesses noted his expression as pages were laid out under ultraviolet light unreadable. Tight. He signed the chain of custody with care. From that moment, he directed the inquiry. Other forensic details were catalogued rust-free mechanical joints, valves still greased, ration tins unopened in storage racks. The submarine had been preserved, not wrecked. It had been left to wait beneath a city that knew nothing of its presence. Each object carried weight, but none heavier than the packet clutched by Dreyer. The forensic anchor of this section, the half-burned logbook pages, carried the first direct reference to a land-based meeting. It was the bridge between disappearance and discovery, between sea patrol and urban burial. Investigators knew the implications before the words were translated. A submarine ordered to dock on land was not routine patrol. It was conspiracy. The bodies remained seated, hollow-eyed in sockets, still strapped at their stations, cameras recorded in silence. The oilskin packet smelled faintly of smoke. The packet was carried to a sterile lab within the Defense Ministry compound. Each sheet was placed under glass. Handwriting was confirmed as Holmes' rigid strokes. Precise timings, the kind of brevity drilled into naval officers. The entries began with normal coordinates, sonar checks, and fuel status. Then the tone shifted. Order received. Shore contact near Copenhagen. Rendezvous essential. The next line read, compass adjusted, bearings falsified, crew uneasy. Several entries repeated the phrase, shore contact, paired with times. One page bore a rough sketch, a dockside outline, angular structures marked in charcoal. It was not a sea berth, but a warehouse block. A crude arrow pointed inland, scrawled at the margin. In Dreyer's handwriting, why here? The most damning artifact was folded inside the packet. A fragment of map, creased and darkened, showed the canal systems of Christianshavn. Red ink circled a district at the water's edge. Beneath, faint pencil added coordinates that matched beneath a warehouse lot. The name was blurred by smudges, but numbers were legible. The location sat less than 3 kilometers from where the submarine was later unearthed. Enevoldsen held the fragment under magnification. Soil grains caught in the folds matched the clay pulled from the excavation shaft. This was not a later forgery. It had been with the crew in 1952. Forensic analysts logged the map as a primary anchor. Its presence suggested a planned meeting in the city's industrial fringe, an exchange masked beneath civilian facades. To test its plausibility, soil scientists drilled samples near the modern warehouse district. Boring rigs cut deep cores. At 13 meters, chemists found a band laced with carbonized residue ash. Oils, industrial debris dated to the early 1950s, mixed within were traces of lead-acid battery discharge, identical to submarine cells of that era. The soil itself carried memory of an event erased above ground. Anna Cruz, though removed from official reports, was called in quietly by one of the technicians. She stood over the soil cores, blackened streaks gleaming under lamplight. No explanation could reconcile the evidence with official naval files. A submarine, directed inland, had approached Christianshavn under orders. Why NATO command had risked such a maneuver was a question the papers never answered. Cross-checking archives produced nothing public. The Defense Ministry denied knowledge, yet in basement stacks. An archivist turned up a thin folder misfiled under civil relief. Inside lay typed manifests of equipment transfers routed through Red Cross covers. Dates aligned with the K-17's disappearance. Among listed cargo personnel units classified. The wording was vague, but its inclusion suggested human movement under disguise of aid. The discovery of the map fragment and the falsified manifests created a new narrative. The submarine's final destination was never open sea. It was a hidden docking beneath Copenhagen's industrial edge, where men or materials were meant to be exchanged beyond scrutiny. The forensic anchor of this section, the hand-inked map fragment, remained the starkest proof. Its red circle glowed like a wound on paper. The logbook fragment pointed toward a meeting on land. But the evidence remained circumstantial until a tape surfaced in an unlikely archive. In June 2022, while reviewing municipal records unrelated to the case, a fisheries clerk flagged a misfiled reel labeled hydrophone, January 1952. It had sat for decades in a cardboard box, unnoticed. The reel was magnetic tape, standard naval hydrophone stock, its casing stenciled with NATO supply codes. When technicians played it back, the recording began with routine sonar pulses, faint merchant screws, and waterborne static. Then came the anomaly. At 3:41 a.m., the audio captured a grinding echo unlike open sea. The pattern was hollow, resonant, and repetitive. Acoustic specialists identified it as contact between steel and stone, not hull against seabed, but deliberate docking motions. The tape ended with 3 sharp knocks, spaced evenly, as if signaled from inside. Seconds later, the recorder clicked silent. Analysts compared frequency curves. The reverberation matched canal walls, narrow and hard, rather than oceanic terrain. The spectrum carried harmonics consistent with enclosed masonry. It placed the submarine not at depth in the Skagerrak, but alongside man-made structures. This was not a sinking, it was an arrival. The reel itself bore marks of tampering. The label, originally typed with Naval Reference Code K-17, 1952, had been crossed out in ink and relabeled as Fisheries Sonar Survey. Catalog numbers in the margin were altered by 1 digit, enough to bury the reel in civil archives rather than military stores. Someone had ensured the recording would not be found in naval searches. Lars Enevoldsen signed custody of the reel. He ordered spectral copies, ensuring multiple backups before sealing the original. His notes were terse. Tape evidences docking against artificial structure. Deliberate concealment evident. Provenance classified. Forensic examiners logged the reel as anchor evidence. When the content was played for senior officials, the room fell silent. One officer whispered, "It was never lost at sea." The remark was not repeated. The discovery tightened the pattern. First the altered compass, then the hand-inked map, and now the hydrophone reel, all pointed toward an inland maneuver. The submarine had executed a rendezvous beneath Copenhagen. What it carried, or what it delivered, remained unstated. The forensic anchor of this section, the degraded hydrophone tape, contained the clearest sound of conspiracy. 3 knocks echoed through steel and stone. The coordinates circled on Dreyer's map pointed toward Christianshavn, a district of canals, warehouses, and cold brick. Much of the old dockside had been demolished in the 1960s, replaced with glass front offices and apartments, but beneath the surface, traces remained. Anna Cruz accompanied Lars Enevoldsen on a discreet site survey, under cover of a routine geotechnical inspection. Core drills were driven into the soil where the marked warehouse once stood. Each sample tube was labeled, logged, and cut under laboratory light. Most cores showed ordinary clay. Then, at 10 meters, a black band emerged. Chemists extracted residues of sulfuric acid, lead, and carbon fingerprints of submarine batteries. No civilian industry in Christianshavn used such materials in 1952. The soil recorded what the city had forgotten. Enevoldsen noted the significance in his report. Chemical trace consistent with submarine cell discharge, localized beneath demolished foundation. No commercial source identified. The finding confirmed what the logbook implied: a vessel had docked here. Transferring energy, bleeding residue into soil. Additional anomalies surfaced. Fragments of corroded steel were sifted from dredged canal silt nearby. They bore NATO primer, flaked and thin, marked with production codes from the early 1950s. The pieces were small, unremarkable, yet matched the composition of the hull unearthed in the subway shaft. They were relics scattered by time, physical shadows of a craft no record admitted had been there. Anna studied the evidence with unease. To her, the logic was mechanical. A vessel, buried under Old Town, must have surfaced nearby. The map fragment had not lied. The sub had come to Christianshavn. It had not drowned at sea. It had risen into the city itself. Locals, when approached quietly, recalled rumors from their parents. An older dockhand remembered as a child seeing lights under the canal one winter night. Another spoke of soldiers in unmarked trucks near the warehouse row. Their testimonies, vague after 70 years, still aligned with the forensic trail. Stories dismissed as folklore now took on weight when matched with soil chemistry. The forensic anchor of this stage was the soil sample itself. It proved presence where absence had been insisted. It carried acid trace long after batteries corroded to nothing. In the earth beneath Christianshavn, the ground still bled lead. The soil beneath Christianshavn confirmed presence, but questions of command remained. Why had the K-17 been ordered inland, who sanctioned a maneuver so far outside recorded patrols? The answers did not appear in Danish files. They surfaced in London. In September 2022, while combing British defense archives, a junior researcher uncovered a carbon copy memo misfiled under agricultural imports. The header bore the name of Major Robert Alden. The liaison, once stationed in Copenhagen during 1952, his warning had been brief. Evidence suggests unsanctioned landfall experiment involving NATO asset K-17. Recommend inquiry. The line was underlined in blue pencil. Below it, stamped in thick black ink, was a single word, destroyed, yet the copy remained, overlooked among trade files. The memo was forwarded to Copenhagen. Enevoldsen read it in silence. Alden had seen enough, 70 years earlier, to suspect deliberate deception. His protest had been suppressed, buried in the same way the submarine itself had been. The archival residue now brought him back into the investigation. Cross-referencing Alden's other correspondence revealed patterns. His logs described pressure from higher command to curtail the search after only 2 weeks. His private notes, never meant for release, mentioned dockside transfer under humanitarian pretext. He had not been trusted with details, but he had recognized contradiction. Within months of filing his concern, Alden was reassigned, his career sidelined. Anna Kruse accompanied Enevoldsen to the Defense Ministry to present the memo. Officials listened without expression. They neither confirmed nor denied its authenticity. The meeting ended with a phrase repeated like protocol: "Operational matters remain classified." No explanation followed. Anna left the building with the sense of walls closing around silence. Yet, the forensic value of Alden's memo could not be erased. Its carbon imprint, faint but legible, placed responsibility on command structures that had long claimed ignorance. It was not the conjecture of conspiracy theorists, but the recorded observation of a serving officer. Its existence contradicted official narratives filed for decades. The forensic anchor of this section, the carbon copy slip, was slight in weight, but heavy in implication. It carried Alden's quiet warning through 7 decades of suppression. On its margin, a clerk's pencil had left one faint word: docked. The fragments began to assemble into a darker pattern: compass deviation, hand-drawn maps, hydrophone tapes, soil chemistry, and Alden's memo all pointed to intent, not accident. The K-17 had not been on routine patrol. It had been assigned to a covert transfer concealed beneath the city. In the defense archives, Enevoldsen discovered a ledger bound in brown cloth. Its cover was stamped Relief Personnel Exchange inside. The columns carried dates from the early 1950s. The entries were terse: Unit A transferred, Unit B received. Names were absent, replaced with coded initials, yet one date matched precisely the night Holmes' submarine went missing. The line read, 5 to shore. 2 received. The page was marked with a Red Cross emblem, but the handwriting differed from civilian clerks. It was military script. Cross-comparison with the recovered logbook confirmed overlap. The entry of shore contact near Copenhagen coincided with the ledger's transaction. Together, they suggested that the K-17 had been used not for patrol, but for human movement extraction or delivery of individuals hidden under the pretense of humanitarian aid. Forensic analysts tested the ink of the ledger. Results placed its origin in 1951-1953, consistent with the time frame. Fibers in the paper stock matched British manufacture, not Danish. This pointed to a cross-alliance arrangement, with layers of deniability built in. Rumors had long circulated of Cold War name swaps scientists traded for defectors. Captured operatives returned in exchange for intelligence. None had ever been acknowledged. The ledger offered the first tangible proof. Each coded entry represented flesh, traded as units in a system. Anna Cruz read the page in silence. For her, the evidence was no longer mechanical anomalies or soil chemistry. It was people. 5 sailors who never surfaced, 2 others whose names remained hidden. The ledger did not explain why the K-17 had been entombed. It only confirmed it had served as a courier for something the governments refused to speak of. Enevoldsen filed his report with the anchor listed as Personnel Transfer Ledger, Red Cross cover. Entry, January 1952. He knew the implication a humanitarian emblem had been used to mask clandestine trade. The ledger smelled faintly of mildew, its corners frayed, but its words carried weight across decades. The page reduced men to numbers. The shaft widened as excavation continued. What had begun as a subway bore turned into a full-scale dig under Copenhagen's Old Town, beneath the submarine's stern. Ground-penetrating radar detected an anomaly, a rectangular void, lined with concrete. Crews cut carefully, breaking through into a sealed chamber. Floodlights pierced dust that had not moved in 70 years. Inside stood crates stacked 3 high, each stenciled with faded markings. The wood was brittle. The nails rusted. Labels bore neutral words: medical exchange, relief stock, rations. Yet the arrangement was military uniform spacing, identical dimensions. Forensic officers pried one crate open. Inside were Red Cross armbands folded in sealed packets. Beneath them lay forged identification tags, each bearing false names and ranks. Their serials never registered in any known military database. At the bottom were ration tins. Stamped 1952, their paper labels still legible. Enevoldsen documented every artifact. Photographs showed armbands pristine, as if awaiting distribution. Chemical testing of the tags revealed steel identical to NATO issue, yet engraved with identities that did not exist. The chamber had preserved evidence of a covert trade, hidden under the mask of humanitarian relief. One crate held something stranger: blank medical forms pre-printed with transfer signatures. Ink analysis confirmed British manufacture. Another contained cloth bundles of civilian clothing, folded neatly. Sizes varied. The implication was stark. Individuals were meant to emerge from the submarine disguised as aid workers, equipped with falsified documents and new attire. The K-17 had not carried only sailors. It had been fitted as a courier for people in transit between shadows. Soil samples from the chamber floor bore oil residue identical to that found in Christianshavn cores. The link was undeniable. This underground depot was part of the same network. The men entombed in the submarine had died alongside evidence of an exchange system never meant to be revealed. Anna Cruz stood in the chamber, her lamp sweeping across rows of crates. She saw symbols of neutrality bent into tools of conspiracy. The Red Cross, meant to mark safety, here marked deception. The forensic anchor of this section, the crate labeled medical exchange, contained objects designed for erasure of identity. The armbands waited in silence, red crosses on white cloth. News could not be contained. Workers whispered, photographs leaked, and within weeks, headlines appeared in Copenhagen's press. Submarine found beneath Old Town, Cold War relic buried in metro shaft. Journalists pressed ministries for comment, but officials issued only a single line. The object is under investigation. Questions about the crew, about the crates, about the logbook, all were met with silence. Families of the missing sailors gathered once more at the military cemetery. Photographs of Holm, Dreyer, and Vangsgaard were lifted from mantelpieces and carried to vigils. For the first time in 70 years, they had confirmation that the men had not been lost at sea. Yet the truth offered no closure. The bodies remained evidence. The state refused to acknowledge their fate. Empty coffins, buried decades earlier, were joined now by images of skeletons still strapped to consoles. Enevoldsen prepared a final dossier. It included the altered compass, the hydrophone reel, the map fragment, the personnel ledger, and the chamber crates, together. The anchors told a story of human exchange hidden beneath humanitarian disguise. But the dossier never reached the public. It was classified, stamped restricted state security. He submitted it knowing it would be buried like the submarine itself. Anna Cruz resigned from the project. Her engineering logs, once technical notes, became a private chronicle of what had been uncovered. In her final entry, she wrote, "Steel in soil, men sealed in, orders unspoken, city built above a coffin." The site was resealed, concrete poured over the chamber, steel plates over the submarine. The metro line was diverted to the public. The obstruction was explained as archaeological ruins of little importance. Yet artifacts remained in a defense vault. Dreyer's last diary fragment was preserved. The ink faded but legible. Its final words read, "We were told to dock on land." The sentence was underlined twice, as though he had known it would matter. Forensic anchors lay catalogued, boxed, stripped of context. Families were told nothing more. The city walked above streets unchanged, while beneath them rested proof of a conspiracy that had rewritten death as disappearance. The last image captured by investigators before the site closed was the submarine's compass. Cracked glass, bent casing, its needle, immovable, pointed toward the shore. The compass needle froze inland,